The child screamed it was a monster and pleaded with someone to save him. He revealed he kept hearing it. He kept hearing its voice and claimed the monster was going to kill him, referring to it as an underground monster. Duke Rubelite stood there and watched his son in shock. He was the Duke of the Grace Empire, a nation blessed by God. When the son he had with his second wife began suffering from auditory hallucinations, Duke Rubelite could not help but recall the incident of 10 years ago. He thought to himself, underground is where that girl is. The Duke's cursed eldest daughter, Rena Rubelite. At just 8 years old, she became capable of wielding sinister black magic. She is an illegitimate child of the Rubelite ducal family who scorched everything she touched. 10 years ago, she was imprisoned underground in a place devoid of anything she could touch. Whether it be people or objects, she was deprived of everything. The Duke was panicking when he decided he must ensure this information is kept secret no matter what. He ordered his men to bring Rena here immediately. When he went into the underground dungeon to receive her, what he saw left him frozen in shock. His eyes widened. The magic emanated from her, making her radiant and resplendent. The Duke ordered his men to take her to the carriage at once. Just looking at her face makes him want to gag. But she was undeterred by his words and kept moving forward towards him. In the Grace Empire, a certain prophecy has been passed down since ancient times. The prophecy is that the power of the furious Demon King will engulf the world, enshrouding everything in darkness. Then the era of the Demon King shall begin. They all realized that meant this was the Demon King because this could only be the Demon King of the prophecy. The servants were also looking at her with wide eyes, trembling uncontrollably as one of them stated, so the prophecy was true all along. One of the foolish staff members seized a small statue and hurled it at her, striking her head before it clattered to the floor. She halted, gazing intently at the statue. The Duke Rubelite believed this was the end. It's just as the prophecy said, every last one of them would be slaughtered. However, she points a finger at the candelabra in the corner to everyone's shock and then points at other decorations and a mirror. She declares all of these belong to her. Outside, the maid informs her everything has been loaded into the carriage. But her glare is fixed at the Duke, who flinches under her hard gaze. Suddenly, she advances towards him with swift determination, causing him to collapse to the ground. He starts pleading for his life, begging her to spare it. The rope binding her arms and waist abruptly gives way. She leans down, bringing her face closer to his, flashing him a sweet smile. She declares she will consider this recompense for her childhood and settles down in the carriage. They all stand there in shock, unable to believe. It is really over. The Duke wonders, is she really letting them go? Because he remembers if everything goes as the prophecy said. No, even if they only consider how she's been treated her whole life, he is sure she would not be satisfied just by killing everyone in this mansion. When the carriage starts moving, she orders it to stop abruptly. She watches them through the window. The Duke, who holds his breath, thinks he knew it. She asks him, may she have a moment? He gulps in fear. But once again catching them off guard when she cracks her neck and asks for a pillow. She thinks her neck will start hurting if she keeps this up. Only when the carriage is far away, the Duke dares to take a breath. He begs in his mind, wanting her to quietly disappear from this world. Meanwhile, Rena has fallen asleep in the carriage now that she has her comfortable pillow. The coachman remembers they told him he would be given a generous reward if he brought her to her destination. He is jolted from his reverie as an illumination emanates from the carriage, enveloping it entirely. Bewildered, he ponders what on earth is happening here. However, his body freezes when he realizes this is the rumored Demon King of prophecy. Before long, her hand bursts through the wood at the front of the carriage, seizing his face with force. Looking down at the unconscious figure, she murmurs she messed up. She messed up again. She thinks to herself she was just trying to knock lightly so that she could talk, but seriously? Rena looks tense as she thinks, even though it's been an entire month, she still cannot control her powers properly. Rena Rubelite, a character in the game, called in this world with the power of love, who oppressed the heroine until the end. The final boss is thwarted by the power of love. She doesn't look impressed as she reveals it wasn't even some kind of great magic. It was just the power of love, and quickly remarks how lame. She wonders how she could have fallen to such a ridiculous kind of magic, or perhaps how she turned out to be this pitiful character. A poor family with many children living a day-to-day existence. She was the sickly youngest daughter of that poor family. They did not have the money, so she couldn't afford proper treatment. Even with treatment, there was no hope of recovery. And her symptoms did not show any signs of improvement either. As far as what she could do about it, she could only resent God. She was actually kind of glad when she reached the end of her life. Even if she felt a little cold and lonely all alone in that empty room, even then, she tried to convince herself this was just fine, reminding herself just like this she will disappear. She saw a white figure in front of her, and then looked around frantically. A thought occurred in her mind if this was the afterlife. The figure said to say she was happy about dying a lonely death, how pitiful she was. She could feel it instinctively that this existence is the God who guides the dead. She thinks about his pitiful remark and concludes it sure likes to say strange things. Leaving. If that is the case, it should have given her a healthy body in the first place, or could have made her born into a rich family where she wouldn't have to worry about the hospital bills. She asked him what was going to happen to her for the sin of cursing God all the time. She looked up and then asked him if she would go to hell. She clenched her fist, thinking it really was a horrible life up until the very end. However, the God declared no, she would be reborn once more. This surprised her and she looked up at him. He suggested in that case, how about being reborn as her desired form? And promised her he shall grant it no matter what conditions she gives. She thought about her desired form. Someone whose presence alone makes others feel love. Someone they want to cherish. Someone they want to protect. She knew, though, her desired form could be a little eccentric. But she believed she was someone to be admired. She did not demand compensation, and she possessed amazing abilities. She was the kind of person who is destined to save the world. She contemplated if she may become just like her. She asked the God, since it was her choice, could she become anyone right? He said that's right. She looked hesitant, casting her eyes down as she stated the person she was to be, but then trailed off. He encouraged her to tell who it is. She admitted before she died she wanted to be reborn as a character in a game. A game called In This World with the Power of Love. She tried to recall her name, but she did not know her name because the player chose it when they started the game. She explained to him that in that game, there was the level 999 Mastermind Demon King, Reincarnated. He understood and started dismissing her. She asked him to wait a second. She wanted to tell it was someone that Reincarnated bullied from the start all the way until the end. She wanted to become a hero who overcame adversity, all the while receiving love and support from those around her. But the gold only said he heard all of her wishes and he prayed that she attained happiness in her life. When she woke up, she was in the cell. She thought to herself she was finished. She told God this was completely wrong and pleaded with him to give her one more chance. She stands up abruptly, taking 2 steps back and colliding with the wall. Her gaze falls on the prison floor, teeming with cockroaches and rats. She struggles to think of her next move now that she has found herself in such a dire situation. The thunder is so loud it feels like it will swallow the world. However, she knows if everything goes according to the game's plot, Reina should be able to get out soon. Once Reina escaped, the world was covered in darkness and a girl came to confront her, though she does not intend on letting that happen. She declares she would make money and live a life far from the reach of the game story. Back in the present, she looks at the unconscious body and murmurs that is why it will be a problem for her if he ends up passing out here. She calls out to him, telling himself to get himself together. He groans and opens his eyes. She states good, she has finally opened his eyes, huh? Asking him how he is feeling. The man suddenly sits on his knees and starts apologizing to her. She assures him no, she does not mean like that. She just means that she is glad he's all right. She was pretty worried. Now the coachman starts apologizing for making someone like her worry about him. This makes her furious. She orders him, like she said, to cut it out and start the carriage already. On their way, she asks him when they are arriving. He informs her they will be arriving at the teleportation stone soon and requests her to wait a little more. Reina thinks about how only royalty and the very well they should be allowed to use teleportation stones and wonders just how much of a rush are they in to get rid of her? She guesses it cannot be helped considering she's the demon king destined to destroy the world. However, she still cannot help but think that even if that is the case, she's still his daughter. When she arrives at her destination, the carriage stops at the checkpost, but when they see the request form from His Excellency the Duke, they let her pass. Reina ponders, so that is the teleportation stone, finding it even more impressive now that she has seen it in person. To her, it is like she has already entered the world of the game. The guard announces they will start the teleportation. She shuts her eyes when it gets very bright, but soon opens them again in shock. Now the weather has changed and the place around her is filled with snow. She gets out of the carriage, looking at the mansion in front. She states this couldn't possibly be the place, could it? The man reads from the request form and informs her this is the mansion of the Abyss, northwest of Iceberry Village in the Winter Snow Duchy, in the right place. They have safely arrived at their destination. Convenient to say she looks very pissed. At the founding of the empire, the emperor granted the first duke the northern territories, which were rampant with disorder and unrest. He was entrusted with defending the empire, using the abilities that have been passed down in the family from generation to generation for more than 1,000 years. The Dukes of the Winter Snow family have continued to protect the north. The Demon King resented that power and placed a curse on the ducal family. Monsters flooded the north and death came to the late Duke and Duchess in the midst of chaos. Someone inherited that great power. Their eldest son, Rostin, had survived. As the prophecy from 1,000 years ago foretold, the Demon King's goal is to occupy the north and the ducal family will be the first target. The priest fell on his knees and apologized to Rostin for failing to prevent the Demon King's curse and pleaded with him to continue to protect the north just as his family's always done. Rostin knew the ruler of the darkness, who wants to coat the world in malice. They are an unknown existence, none have laid their eyes on them, and none have heard their voice. Whether or not they truly exist is a mystery. But one thing is for certain, Rostin has never doubted a prophecy of the High Priest, not even once. Rostin is at the study room with the door open and a man rushes in informing him they have received a prophecy. It says that monsters will come from the far northwest from the mansion of the Abyss. He rises from his seat as he murmurs again and asks him for the preparations. The man replies they have already been completed. Everyone is on standby at the barracks, ready to leave at a moment's notice. He orders to depart immediately for the mansion of the Abyss. He declares once again he will eliminate them all, leaving not a single one behind. Rana smirks and remarks in sarcasm that the Abyss mansion, it really lives up to its name. Further adding, isn't it the same as telling her to freeze to death? She curses the Duke under her breath, while the man tries to run for his dear life. However, he passes out again. She looks down at him in surprise. She did not realize her power tends to go wild when she gets angry. She has hoisted the man over the shoulder as she tries to open the lock to no avail, but soon realizes the door is frozen shut too. She is cold, hungry, and now angry too. She notices the door is melting. In that case, she decides she should try controlling the power like she did inside the castle. Trapped in the cell with the cockroaches and mice and the issues of her power causing trouble. Her powers had told her to command the darkness surrounding her. This confused her. She wanted to know who was talking and to command whom. The response was darkness and the warning to not escape from it. She listened to the voice and concentrated on doing what it said. To her surprise, it worked. She thinks, just like back then, if she can control her power well, maybe she can unfreeze the whole mansion and proceed to do exactly what she set her mind on. Soon it's done. Inside the mansion, Reina watches a man sleep in his bed. She surrounded the entire mansion with a bit of flame to maintain a warm temperature. Following that, she luxuriates in a bath, emitting contented whimpers as she murmurs, "It feels like home." She reveals fortunately there's plenty of food in the house, although it's all frozen. However, melting them should do the trick. Plus, there are plenty of dresses too, though the style might be a bit reminiscent of an older noblewoman's, but anyway. She sighs in relief when she wears one of the dresses as she finally got out of that beggar look. The coachman calls out to her asking if she is here. She calls him in. The trembling man wishes to go home. She takes it as a betrayal that he still wishes to go home even after she saved him. He tells her his young daughter and elderly in-laws are waiting for him at home. He must return home. However, she believes if he goes back, the Duke won't let him off so easily. In the game, Duke Rubelite slaughtered all the servants who witnessed Reina's power. He killed this coachman too, so she knows even if he somehow makes it back from the freezing northern edge, he will meet his end at the Duke's hands. She thinks to herself his life is already as good as dead, and most probably his family is already dead. She apologizes to him but lets him know he cannot go back home, also emitting the illumination around her in warning. She explains to this perplexed coachman that how will she live in this huge mansion without any servants, instructing he must take care of her until someone comes here to save him. Although she promises him not to worry, she will pay him generously. She flings a statue hand toward him, watching as it tumbles to the floor before him. His eyes widen when she reveals this is the golden hand of the Duke. She then says isn't that enough for him and lets him know there's plenty of food in the pantry on the first floor so he can help himself. She decides to continue to explore the mansion. Tears stream down the coachman's face, his eyes well up as he reveals he was just desperate to survive, but to think she even hired him. He declares to himself she is his lord from now on. Rihanna pauses in her steps when her gaze lands on something. It resembles very much to a snowball, so she guesses it is a snowball, but soon finds herself guessing if it is a rabbit. On the other hand, the Duke is panicking because he is aware that the child will surely manifest as that demon king. Fear is evident in his eyes when he thinks if that happens, even if the Saintness saves the world, the Rubelite family won't escape destruction. He's determined not to let that happen. He asks his man has Reyna arrived at the mansion of the Abyss. The man responds yes, she should have arrived by now. His eyes look empty and hold no emotions when he announces to send an assassin there for his own kid. He declares before she goes berserk, he will erase her from the world. On the other hand, Reyna feels like her heart is going to explode. She recalls the earlier events when she sat down in front of the rabbit, thinking it was so cute. Her eyes twinkled in awe as she asked, did it just grow or was trying to be intimidating as a monster? The poor rabbit was feeling uncomfortable, but she remained glued there, her eyes sparkling as she looked at him and praised how adorable. When it tried to run away from her, she found that cute too. She thought to think such a thing as a monster. She pictured herself as the master of all kinds of cute monsters, and suddenly becoming the Demon King didn't look that bad at all. A commanding presence steps behind her and asks what she is doing here. She looks over her shoulder to find Rostin looking at her. She looks at him, her breath catching in her throat because of how handsome he is. He warns this is a monster-infested area and to leave this mansion at once. The attraction vanishes at once. How dare he barge into someone's yard and tell him to leave? She blurts out she has just finally managed to get her own house and he's telling her to leave. She is fuming at him. His guard appears behind him, a mix of shock and fury over how she talked to his master, but the master in question remains unbothered and starts his investigation again when his gaze lands on the rabbit monster. She lets him know in a firm voice this is her property and to get out. Rostin compiles, fine for now, he's going to hunt monsters, but lets her know he will come back later. She stubbornly tells him even if he comes back, she's not leaving here, so he should not waste his time. Rostin's guard looks surprised that someone is living in the mansion of the Abyss, and this is the first time since that person. Rostin responds it's a dangerous place. People should not live here anymore. He stops and looks back because he thought it was just his imagination. Yet as he looks around that mansion, there is no snowstorm. On the other hand, she wonders what the heck is he? With such a handsome appearance, he must be an important character in the game, but why doesn't she remember him? She looks hysterical as she is reminded of him telling her to leave. She blurts out to herself she planned to gain economic freedom and live a retired middle-aged life here. She absolutely cannot leave this mansion. The Duke's guard shows her the property papers declaring this house now belongs to Duke Rostin Wintersnow of the Northern Duchy. He explains due to many years of unpaid taxes, the ownership has been transferred and they asked her to leave the mansion immediately. She stands there, her mouth agape. The Duke asks again to be sure, did she say she would not leave? His man informs her yes. Moreover, it turns out she is the princess of the Rubelite ducal family. He believes it is only a matter of time before the princess leaves that house. When a few monsters come down, she will be scared and run away on her own. However, he asks him to make sure to guard the surroundings so she doesn't get hurt until then. The moon shines dominantly in the night sky, when the Duke steps in only to find that bunny from earlier laying in the bed asleep. He thinks with the monsters appearing more frequently, it seems that the day the Demon King appears is not far off. He tells the rabbit just to hang in there a bit longer and declares he will definitely eliminate the Demon King. The rabbit transforms into a boy. He promises to lift the curse placed on him. It was a messy mansion, however, the entire house was warmed with a thin layer of magic. And thanks to the coachman cleaning all over the mansion, it made it look livable. However, the problem is the ownership of this mansion has been transferred to the Duke of the North. Also remembering, she was told that there are no fresh vegetables and fruits in the food warehouse. When she visits the market, the shop owner tells her she should not expect fresh vegetables or foods in the north. She further informs her that in the past it was warm enough to grow various things, but now there are always blizzards, which make it impossible to grow anything. Reina finds that strange. They say that the blizzard and the monsters were brought by the devil. However, she never did anything. The priest states to the Duke, who is sitting on the other end of the table, that the prophecy is deviating. Duke Rubelite is confused and wishes to know what he means by the prophecy is deviating. He points out at this point the Demon King should have appeared around this time right here in the east. He states it looks like the problems have arrived due to his lack of virtue as the high priest. The Duke blurts out that is not it, there must be another cause. The Duke also suggests, wouldn't it be possible to appear in the north or the south? Or maybe it could appear in the west. But in that moment, his man interrupts him, informing that the Duke of Winter Snow of North has visited. He says he needs to talk to him about food issues and the young lady. This also catches the priest's attention. Duke Rostin exclaims the food shortage in the north is serious and has come to ask Duke Rubelite for food support. The priest assures him the food shortage in the north is all their concern. He also suggests the eastern part has a lot of grain areas, so it would be good to support it. He then calls out to the high priest, wanting to talk about the northern blizzard. He states the residents are having a hard time and believes for the sake of the residents, he thinks they should stop it. The high priest admits when he thinks of the residents, he feels very sorry for them. However, he reminds him the Duke's younger brother could be in danger. It would be hard to maintain his body without the blizzard. Sadness flickers in his eyes as he thinks about his younger brother. However, the high priest changes the topic, asking about what he has to say about the young lady. The Duke Rubelite looks like he wouldn't want anything more than to bolt out of the place. The people in the north gather together when the Duke returns with food. He strictly orders his men to distribute one portion at a time, to let them take it one by one. One by one, people take their portions. However, when Veronica's turn comes, she complains it's mixed with soil and gravel, asking in disbelief if they are giving this to people to eat. A man chastises her. Another one tells her to watch what she says about the Duke. He must have received what was given to him from the east. The first man agrees and tells her to be grateful for this. However, Veronica looks defeated and murmurs she can't live like this anymore. She might have to leave north now. Her husband calls after her, but the other man points out Veronica used to harvest and eat high-quality crops. He is sure she must be more heartbroken than them. Reina, observing the entire ordeal, thinks about the harvested high-quality crops the man mentioned. She abruptly tells the coachman to wait for her here as she needs to talk to the man and rushes away without waiting for his reply. As she's running away, the Duke's gaze falls on her. He remembers what her father said about it. Duke Rubelite declared without any hesitation at once he doesn't think she is his daughter, and whether she starves to death or freezes to death in the north has nothing to do with their family. He also warned Rostin to also be careful, stating her behavior is very shallow and accusing her of being a vicious woman. Looking around the Abyss mansion, she discovered land that seemed to have been used as a field in the past. She thinks, although only the ground is frozen now, it's because of her power that keeps the mansion warm. She wonders, would not that be possible? When Veronica comes within hearing distance, she calls after her. Veronica turns to look at her. Reina takes notice of her dark purple eyes, silver hair with a red tinge, and a noble with a luxury dress. Veronica thinks this looks like the crazy lady who moved into the Abyss mansion. Reina tells her she happened to hear this story earlier and questions is it true that she has been growing high-quality crops. She seems turned for a moment, but then nods, telling her that is right. She has been working hard to grow crops even in this barren north. She states she joined forces with the villagers, grew crops, and was happy to share the well-grown grain. However, it's all over now. Because as long as the blizzard does not stop, they cannot grow anything in the north. Suddenly, she fumes. The threat lingers heavily in the air as she promises if the devil who spreads a snowstorm appears, she might as well rush in and fight. Reina points out no matter how much she does, the snowstorm never stops and wants to know if it would be possible to grow crops if they build a greenhouse. What worries Veronica is how they can maintain the temperature. There is not enough firewood even to heat the house. In response, Reina smirks and says she doesn't have to worry about it, thinking to herself she has her power. The Duke tells his men they have done great work, then glances over his shoulder thinking she went that way. His steps carry him to the same direction. His guard rushes after him, asking where he is heading to. He replies to the lady. He believes he has to go and warn her again, but halts in his tracks when he sees a shaken Veronica on the floor while Reina hovers over her. Veronica's face is contorted into shock. Reina flinches when the Duke's guard demands to know if she's harassing Veronica. She tries to explain but comes up with nothing. The Duke calls her name and states he will take her home, but then corrects himself to the Abyss Mansion, which she will soon be driven out of. On their way back in the carriage, he reminds her he definitely asked her to leave the mansion. She realizes somehow it feels like déjà vu and remembers a similar thing happening to her in her past life. She thinks this life is also bad, being scolded by the landlord. But then she convinces herself to come to her senses. Determined to definitely buy her own home, she points out, did not she say she would buy back ownership of the mansion? So why won't he sell it? She asks him, isn't he short of money? He replies, this is a place where monsters appear during a blizzard, so it is not a mansion suitable for a noble lady like her to live in. She glares at him and is mad about him treating her like a lady who does not know anything about the world. She wants to call him a fool and tell him she's the devil. Forcing her features to relax, she reminds him, won't the saintness appear and save the world? She believes in saintness. However, he makes it clear he does not believe in saints or anything like that. This answer stuns her because she did not expect that. He sighs deeply and states the devil has not yet appeared, but it's already showing its power. Further adding, saintness only appears in prophecies, so no one knows whether it will actually appear or not. He declares he cannot just rely on such superstitions for the safety of the North. She tries to recall this character, but she doesn't even remember what it was like in the game. He was a character with no real presence and only remembers he was struggling so hard alone in the North. She comments, what a sense of duty. He fixes her with a cold look and hopes she will stop bullying people around him. Once again, she seems taken aback by him. He adds noble who behave as they please. He doesn't even want to witness it. She tries to deny the accusation of bullying Veronica, but the carriage shakes hard enough to capture both of their attentions. What was that just now? She questions. It's like something is riding on the top of a carriage. Bandits surround them from all sides. The coachman asks what is going on. The leader lets him know it's about a woman, the one with silver hair and red eyes. He promises if they hand over that woman, he will let them go safely. The Duke's man's sword clashes with that of his enemies. However, he stumbles and collapses onto the cold ice. His foe raises his sword to deliver the fatal blow, but before he can strike, he is hit with such force that he is sent flying through the air before crashing to the ground. All of them are stunned into silence before one of them breaks it by declaring that man is the Duke of the North. Rostin finds it strange the mercenary group targeting the lady of the mansion. He is also surprised over the fact that to capture a woman, they really hired this many people for it. One of the men from the mercenary group asks the other what is going on. There was no news about such a giant coming. The Duke tells them to drop their weapons and surrender immediately, warning them to execute them on the spot if they don't do what he says. A mage appears, calling them a bunch of idiots and ordering them to stop the Duke, announcing he will deal with the woman himself. The Duke is momentarily stunned. He contemplates in disbelief the presence of a mage, and that he was hiding with invisible magic all this time. The mage starts performing some ritual. He conjures several magical ice daggers and directs them simultaneously towards her through the carriage window. The Duke screams at her to watch out, but before they can reach her, they halt midair. Her eyes completely turn red, and the magic emanates from her with such intense illumination that it flashes brightly all around, engulfing everything in its brilliance. And the daggers melt, and so does the wand of the sorcerer. As she steps out of the carriage, the Duke looks at her and realizes it's the black flame which burns everything to ash. However, it only burned the mercenaries' weapons and clothes. She calls out to the Duke Winter Snow and accuses him of making it look like she had been tormenting Veronica earlier. She explains to him about Veronica that she was just showing her some of the magic she uses. One of the mercenary men wonders what kind of power is this. He was contracted to kill just one young girl. They did not mention this black magic to him. He also realizes it is exactly like the power of the Demon King. She hopes he will clear up that misunderstanding for her. He remains unresponsive for a moment. But then, to her shock, he raises his sword and points it at her. The Duke demands an explanation from her, a convincing reason. He wants to know why she's using such ominous black magic. She remains standing there with wide eyes. On the other hand, Veronica looks at her hands and admits she was greatly surprised when she was engulfed by the black flames of the magic the lady showed. Suddenly, she's on the horse and rushing somewhere. Her father calls after her, unable to believe she is leaving, but her mother places a comforting hand on his shoulder and tells him she is not leaving and is going to meet the crazy lady of the mansion. The knights were talking among themselves that someone moved into the mansion of the abyss. Moving into such a dangerous place, they were surprised that it's the princess of the Rubelite family. They called her Crazy Princess. Back in the present, the Duke's man looks at her in shock and corrects himself that is not a crazy princess, but a crazy demon king. Rostin has taken notice how she burned everything she wanted in every direction, and realizes the limits of her power is unimaginable. He asks her why she approached Veronica. Was she planning to brainwash her into her subordinate? She is perplexed and wonders what this nonsense is. She asks him, is he interrogating her right now? She points an accusatory finger at the mercenaries, telling him the one he should be questioning are those. The mage tells them to treat, and with the help of his magic, they all vanish into thin air. She tries to get his attention on them, but he is undeterred. She accuses him of being the reason they all ran away. He claims there are no wizards in the world who use black magic. Such magic cannot be learned nor passed down. She asks him in a dry tone, so he's saying she is the demon king, just because she used black magic. However, she thinks to herself the Duke is right. In fact, she is the demon king, but she is to deny as much as possible. She makes a sad face, reminding him she was a victim whether she learned the black magic somewhere else or not. She did not attack them first, did she? He thinks the power shown is undoubtedly that of the demon king. However, this appearance now. He states there's only one way to know for sure and tells her his parents suffered from the demon king's curse and passed away, but he who received the same curse survived. He retracts the sword and sheathes the sword at his waist, ordering her to attack him. He claims as someone who survived their dream king's curse, he will be able to tell if she is the demon king or not. With wide eyes, she murmurs what? How can she attack? However, a voice in her mind whispers to kill him, making her believe it is a perfect opportunity right now. It demands again for her to kill him right now. She's left stunned for a moment, but then she becomes blinded by the desire to own a house. But before she can do anything, the coachman intervenes between them, telling him there is a misunderstanding. He states even though his lady's power is a bit frightening at first, with her power she has provided hot water and kept the mansion warm. The coachman also claims even if his lady might be the demon king, she has undoubtedly become a reformed good demon king. She tells him to wait a second. Looking at him, she asks that he also thought she was the demon king. Veronica arrives at the scene too. Confusion swirls in her eyes as she takes in the scene. She wonders what on earth is going on. On the other hand, a man has ended up killing all the mercenary group. He informs Duke Rubelite that they took care of all the mercenaries, but the mage escaped. He exclaims, it was too much for just a few people like them. They should have sent in an army. His man points out that if they don't chase and take care of them quickly, rumors might spread. The Duke pauses at the mention of the rumor. He suddenly jumps up from his chair, announcing they should spread the rumors instead. He orders his men to tell all the mercenaries and knights he knows that it seems the demon king has appeared in the mansion in the far northeast. The misunderstanding that the princess was bullying Veronica was cleared up thanks to Veronica's own explanation. However, the Duke wonders the purpose of the prince is coming to the north. Is it due to the conflict with her father, Duke Rubelite? Rostin's guard is shocked to find the first Duke's statue's hand missing. The coachman shows them the instant warm water that comes out immediately when they turn it on. He also points out the indoor temperature is maintained as a constant 24 degrees. He exclaims, isn't it all thanks to the lady's magic? He then asks the coachman, have there been any monsters invading during all this time, or did the princess handle them all? She says if he means an intruding monster, there is one, a very small and cute one. She takes him to the garden and shows him this one, the monster that comes to their house to play every day. Rostin flinches in shock. On the other hand, the priest is praying when the man interrupts him and tells him there's a rumor circulating among the mercenaries these days. It might be worth investigating its truth. What rumor? He asks. He informs him at the far northwest end there is a rumor that the demon king has appeared. He falls silent for a moment, but once he recovers his voice, he points out it is different from the prophecy. However, he believes it's worth checking out. She caresses him and states, "It seems like he likes it warm here." Murmuring to herself, even the monsters can be this cute. Rostin thinks about how Luca has a body made of snowflakes due to the Demon King's curse and is confused how he doesn't melt at this temperature. He also notices how she has the ability to share warmth while keeping Luca's body unharmed. He calls out to her. As she looks up, he hurls a sword in her direction. The sword doesn't strike her but sails past her. As she is recovering her breath, he tells her even if there was no killing intent, he thought she would reflexively counterattack. She asks, "What is this?" Does he still think she is the Demon King? She warns him to stop it already, and claims to be just a mage who handles fire well. He stares at her for a moment, but then closes his eyes, saying he cannot believe that yet. He states until all doubts are cleared, he cannot return the ownership of the mansion, since the safety of the North is his responsibility. He declares he will find out who hired the mercenaries that attacked the princess. She looks lost in thoughts and believes she already knows who it is. The Duke and his man leave, and she stares at their departing figures. Reina thinks if there's one thing that the Duke overlooked, it's that a living being with killing intent cannot survive inside this mansion. She muses so he should consider it a stroke of luck that he tested her without any killing intent. The mage from the mercenary group is in a restaurant in a disguise when he hears a group in a distance talking about Reina. One of them tells his friends that crazy princess who moved into the mansion of the Abyss. Turns out she's the eldest daughter of the Rubelite ducal family. His friend wants to know how she ended up in the North. The mage thinks the power he witnessed was definitely the power of the Demon King, and if the Rubelite family tried to hide that their daughter is the Demon King, this information, if used too well, could make him a lot of money. Reina asks Veronica if the temperature is okay. She responds yes, the temperature is sufficient to grow crops. She thinks about how Lady Reina created a real greenhouse. But the problem is the power that created the greenhouse might not be. She tries to convince herself that logically someone who wants to grow crops, there's no way they would grow crops right. The High Priest watches outside the window, his face grim. According to the informer, the world is now full with screams and flames. There had to be chaos. He thinks the devil should have appeared a long time ago and covered the world with black flame. He also realizes it is so quiet and wonders what happened. His junior calls out for him and informs him a man who said he met the devil came from the North. The mage from the mercenary sits on his knees and greets him. On the other hand, as soon as the crops are planted in the greenhouse, they are dying at a faster rate. Veronica starts shaking uncontrollably because she definitely did all the conditions, so then why? No matter what they plant, they lose their vitality in an instant. Reina contemplates if it is because this power is the power of the devil. The devil whispers in her ear, wanting her to come to her senses. He asks her if she knows that her power is not meant to be used for this. It is all useless. When the devil sitting on her shoulder disappears, she is left all alone. Veronica tells her on the way to the Abyss mansion she encountered a long queue. Tired of cold and hunger, they were people leaving the North. Veronica tells her she does not have to pay her anything but requests her to not say that she would give up even for the North so that they can live here. She pleads with her until then to help them. She looks taken aback for a moment, but then clenches her fist and her eyes turn cold. She thinks in her mind she had no intention of sharing her harvest with others. Now that she thinks about it, her magic was not always destructive. When she used magic for others, it did not hurt or anything. Everyone with a heart for the good. However, when she opens her mouth to speak, what comes out of it is the promise that she won't give up. She makes it clear she doesn't know how helpful the crops grown here will be to the North, but is determined to once again try it. On the other hand, the High Priest asks the mage if he means the Duke Rubelite's family. He responds yes, she hid her identity and was hiding in the North. He asks him again, what did he say her name was? He lets him know it is Reina Rubelite and she is the devil. Their another attempt is successful, as this time the crops don't die but survive. Reina claims she is grateful, really. Veronica thinks about her as a lady who uses black magic. Although she created a greenhouse with black flames, she also wonders if life grows here, then will this become proof that the ladies know the devil? The High Priest seems a little too excited for the appearance of the Demon King. The coachman smiles at Reina, expressing his joy over finally getting a reply from his wife and daughter. He also informs her they say he was in the capital during that time, so he did not see the letter she sent. She thinks if he was in the capital, that means he did not die at the hands of the Duke. Reina, out of nowhere, suggests why he doesn't bring the two of them here. She states would not it be good for him to stay with his family in the Abyss Mansion. His eyes well up and he expresses his gratitude. He tells her his daughter went to the National Culinary School in the capital when she was a child, and he hasn't seen her in ages because he has worked. However, he has never been worried because she's so mature and sincere. He shows her the portrait of his daughter. She looks at it and thinks she's cute. Later in the garden, she meets with his daughter named Mia, who greets her and claims her father owes her a lot. She returns her greetings with a smile. The coachman hugs his wife tightly and exclaims she doesn't know how worried he was. He pleads with her to never be apart again. Mia apologizes on their parents' behalf. Reina realizes she is indeed mature. Inside the mansion, she tells her she heard she went to the National Culinary School. She says yes, but her face falls as she admits her cooking is terrible. She further adds he will be disappointed if she tastes her dishes. However, Reina asks her if she likes cooking, doesn't she? She doesn't meet her eyes as she replies she does. Reina then says it is fine. Reina is currently having a beef jerky and is not in a position to choose any kind of dish. After she lets her know this, she asks Mia if she would like to be a chef at her mansion. Mia is not good enough, but she will give it a try. Mia lets out a gasp when she sees the fire, as she has never seen a black fire like this before. Reina lets her know it is a fire she made with magic. She glances back at Reina nervously and asks so she's not a devil, is she? Reina remarks that she is straightforward. She teases her, whispering in her ear as long as she cooks well, she won't destroy the world. Mia says the sense of responsibility is becoming bigger and requests her not to look forward to it too much. The table is filled with different kinds of dishes. She looks at them and says their shape looks good. This is her first time eating a different dish since coming to this world. No matter how bad it is, she decides you will eat it. As she takes her first bite, her eyes widen and she pauses. Mia is totally focused on her reaction. When she remains quiet, she calls up to her. Reina ponders over the fact that she has never eaten a dish like this in her life. She realizes it is incredibly delicious. Mia hesitantly asks her if she was surprised by her poor cooking. She believes she cannot cook anything great, and it's because it's a woman's hand. Reina asks her what she means and looks angry as she demands to know what on earth did she listen to at the culinary school. She tells her it is such an amazing day, she has never eaten something this delicious in her life. Mia looks surprised. A third voice comes agreeing with Reina. It is the Duke's guard who looks too emotional over a dish and claims it is a dish that makes him happy because it is so delicious. Reina asks him why he is eating here. Mia bites her lower lip, her face crumbling, and suddenly she bursts into tears. Confessing they say women's hands inherently are not good to make noble dishes. She also admits she has been told to go back to her hometown. This makes Reina infuriated. She demands to know what she's talking about. She brings Mia closer, urging her to listen carefully. She declares she will let her cook whatever she wants here, and tells her to let her know whatever ingredients she wants. Once again, she almost breaks down in tears. The knight also watches them with tears in his eyes. The priest has turned the mage into a statue. The Duke looks at him in shock. The priest flashes a creepy smile and says he would like to hear from the Duke about the Duke's daughter, Reina Rubelite. Rostin asks in surprise, was the food that delicious? His guard promises him he would be shocked once he tries it and calls it an extremely delicious dish. He sighs deeply and reminds him he did not assign him to monitor to report such things and he may leave now. He tried to track down the mercenaries who fled that time, but he could not find them. The mastermind behind it sent a mercenary group, including a mage, just to capture one woman. He realizes this means the mastermind is someone who is well aware of her powers. The Duke's knight is also helping them out in the greenhouse. Reina tells Veronica this guy, after getting a few free meals, has become quite a diligent worker. However, she doubts if the Duke of the North really sent him here for this purpose. But Veronica points out it is good for them if he helps them out. According to Veronica's suggestion, she decided to cook and share harvested crops for the orphans who are affected by monsters. She promises the children she will make sure everyone gets their share and not to worry, but to line up and wait for their turn. Her gaze lands on one of the children who stands out. She realizes he doesn't seem like a refugee. His clothes are rather upscale. Veronica appears behind her and whispers young Master Luca. Reina asks her, does she know him? She replies everyone in the north knows him. He's the second son of the Winter Snow family, young Master Luca Winters now. She looks deep in thought and when she realizes, she freaks out, asking again, doesn't that mean he's the youngest brother of the Northern Duke? The orphan children happily enjoy the food she has brought for them. Luca says the North is the place their winter snow family must protect and expresses his gratitude for her help. She smiles and states, well, she cannot turn a blind eye when everyone is starving. The poor child's eyes flicker with sadness as he admits to her the North was not always such a difficult place to live. He also confesses to her the reason why there's a snowstorm in the North is because of him, explaining that it is because of the curse on him that the high priest had no choice but to cast the magic. He murmurs in a small voice when he thinks about how the entire North is suffering just because of him. He cannot bear it. Raina's eyes match the sadness in his. Kneeling down in front of him, she admits she doesn't know what a curse is, but if there is anything she can do to help him, she will do her best to assist. She assures him he can trust her and calls herself quite the formidable mage. He looks a little hesitant, but then shakes his head and says he has already received a lot of help from her. Duke Rubelite is informed all mercenaries have been withdrawn. Several who did not follow the orders have been punished. He recalls a conversation he had with the priest who said he won't ask about anything. Instead, from now on, he would follow his orders only. He leaned in close and whispered in his ear that he would appreciate it if he could start by withdrawing the mercenaries who went to the North because there is a divine law as the god mentioned. The Duke shakes with anger as he curses the high priest. Duke Rubelite also remembers when he confessed to him that Reina was indeed the Demon King. His reaction was rather pleased and excited. He tries to understand the divine law mentioned by God. What on earth could that mean? On the other hand, the question of why Luca says he's already getting a lot of help from her preoccupies her mind. It's like he's met her before. Her gaze then lands on the rabbit in front of her. She remembers Veronica telling her Luca was cursed by the Demon King. As a result, he can only return to his true form once a month. She states he cannot even enjoy his youth properly. It's so pitiful. She realizes he always disappears once a month. She concludes it is him, Luca. If there is one place that sends shivers down the spine of Northern people, it is the Northern Labyrinth, a complex network of tunnels carved into the Cyan Mountains like an anthill. The Northern Labyrinth used to release occasional monsters, but recently it's been spewing them out as if on a relentless rampage. Veronica tells everyone else the situation is getting out of control. According to the residents, despite the Duke and the expedition team patrolling around the mountains regularly, there's no sign of the monster activity decreasing. Reina is in a hurry in a market when she bumps into someone who is fleeing. The woman running after him screams he is a thief. She realizes the security within the castle has deteriorated rapidly because Duke Winter Snow has gathered soldiers to drive out the increased monsters. He leads them outside the castle. Sadness evident on her face as she recalls Luca's words that the North is the place their Snow Winter family must protect. She then also thinks about how she saw him in his rabbit form. She tried to avoid using magic as much as possible in the village, but now she has no other choice. She uses her magic to trap the thief who is being surrounded by it. She tells the thief he should not touch other people's belongings. All the people around watch in fear and in shock, because they all realize the same thing, that is dark magic. She seems to realize too late that she is getting attention from people all around. She points an accusatory finger at the thief and says he's the thief, not her. But there is no relief on people's faces, only fear. She realizes everyone is on edge. It's already a time when they are extremely afraid of the Demon King, and now she has used dark magic. She admits to herself she should not have used it. They all start whispering among themselves, calling her a Demon King. Veronica makes her way through the crowd, wanting to see why they are all acting like this. She tries to remind them the lady has been so helpful all this time. But Reina stops her, believing it is of no use. Suddenly, the crowd scatters and starts running in all directions. They run into the safety of their homes and shops and shut the doors, leaving her with only Veronica. She realizes everyone is seized by fear. She says it is better if she just leaves, urging Veronica, who looks sad on her friend's behalf. In the shadows, two priests are being witnesses to it all. In the cold mountains, where snow is falling heavily, Duke Rostin commands his men to check their equipment and to rest until the monsters appear. All his men look defeated. He is also aware everyone is at their limit. He lets them consider the possible consequences if they are unable to stop the rampage of the labyrinth, which he believes is that the North will be annihilated. He also recalls his conversation with the high priest, who told him, It could be that the Northern Labyrinth may have been activated by the power of the Demon King. He looked confused and repeated the power of the Demon King. The High Priest then asked him if in the Northern Domain, was there any person suspected of being the Demon King? In the Abyss Mansion, Veronica looks hysterical. She exclaims they are all burned to ashes, those people who called her the Demon King in the market. She also informs her that everyone in the village is suspecting her. Again repeating everyone for the emphasis, she further reveals that all their houses are also burned down. Reina also looks nervous, probably aware that someone is trying to frame her. The scene begins with Rostin returning to his castle, his expression heavy with worry. Chase approaches him and asks if he is okay, and then he suggests Rostin that he should get some rest. However, Rostin shakes his head firmly, insisting there is no time for that. The situation has worsened significantly, and he must go directly to the Duke of Rubelite in the Eastern Territory. Even though there are only a few soldiers available, he believes he needs their support urgently. The scenes then shift to the Duke of Rubelite's Grand Hall. The Duke looks apologetic as he speaks to Rostin, explaining that he truly regrets having to make him travel all this way. He then states that their own situation is not good, and providing soldier support is simply not feasible at this time. The Duke emphasizes the practical concerns, questioning who will tend to the fields if they send their farmers into battle. He reminds Rostin that they need these workers to produce food and pay their taxes. Rostin listens and then asks if it would still be possible to get some knights. The Duke shakes his head, explaining that not all knights come from noble families, and sending them north would be dangerous, especially since there is no great prize to be won in that territory. This only intensifies Rostin's agitation. He thinks for a moment before trying to find a silver lining. He tells the Duke not to worry too much, suggesting that they can still rely on the East for food support. Rostin rises from his seat, feeling that he has wasted valuable time. He starts to head towards the west, but the Duke stops him with a final question. He inquires about his daughter, Reina. Rostin wonders that still as a father, he's worried about his daughter and then replies that she is doing well, but the Duke presses further. He tells Rostin not to refer to her as his daughter in a tone that hints at foreboding. The Duke warns him to be cautious of Reina, saying she is nothing but a passageway to evil. The scene then shifts to Reina, who is deep in thought. She sits alone, reflecting on the villagers' doubts and fears. She understands their concerns after all. She feels like the devil in this game. The activation of the Northern Labyrinth and Luca's curse weigh heavily on her conscience. She knows that her existence in this world could lead to disaster, no matter her intentions. A nagging question arises in her mind: is it even possible to change the rules of this game? As her inner turmoil intensifies, her inner demon surfaces, reminding her that the labyrinth, the curse, and the suffering villagers are all somehow linked to her. It tells her that it is her fault, and even worse, that this is her role in the narrative. The demon urges Reina to take drastic action, suggesting that if she kills them all, the problem will be resolved. The suggestion echoes in her mind, leaving her conflicted. The scene shifts back to Rostin, who stands with his soldiers. He informs them about the situation. Although they did not receive help from the east, they are fortunate to have support coming from the south and west. He orders everyone to prepare because as soon as the reinforcements arrive at the teleportation zone, they will head straight to the Northern Labyrinth. As the soldiers begin to move, Rostin reflects on how they managed to get support at such a crucial time. He recalls the Northern Labyrinth's continuous production of monsters and wonders how long this dreadful situation will persist. His thoughts drift back to the warnings he received from Reina's father about his daughter. Suddenly, the soldiers come to a halt. Chase, ever observant, notices Princess Reina standing before them. Rostin's shock is evident as he sees her there. Reina approaches with a strange look in her eyes and tells them she heard they were struggling against the Northern Labyrinth. She expresses a desire to help them, but her next question catches everyone off guard. She asks Rostin if she should burn him because he is as warm as her. The weight of her words hangs in the air, leaving everyone uncertain about her true intentions. Reina looked directly at the Duke, a strange smile playing on her lips as she suggested that she would wrap him up in fire. It might look odd, she explained, but he would feel warm. The Duke and his soldiers were taken aback, their expressions a mix of shock and confusion. She raised an eyebrow, questioning their startled reactions. Chase finally spoke up, saying they were shocked because she was suddenly talking about burning the Duke. Given the situation, he found it hard to be surprised at her suggestion. Reina then inquired about the real reason for her visit. She confidently announced that she was there to help them and would clear the northern labyrinth. She boldly asked if burning up all the monsters would solve the problem. The Duke, intrigued, began to narrate in his mind that the princess possessed immense power. If they could somehow borrow that power, they might actually be able to eliminate the monsters that had been pouring out of the labyrinth. Even Tappy, the larger threat, could potentially be stopped. Reina continued, stating that if they destroyed the labyrinth stone located in the center of the northern labyrinth, the monsters would cease to be created. She proclaimed that destroying that stone wouldn't be difficult. The Duke, however, was skeptical. He asked her how she had come by this information, expressing that he had been fighting the northern labyrinth his entire life and had never heard such details before. Reina explained that she had cleared this game multiple times. She mentioned that she had heard rumors spread among wizards regarding the labyrinth's vulnerabilities. The Duke's suspicion grew as he listened. He revealed that he had also heard troubling rumors about her. Some said she had given food to village children, while others claimed she burned down their houses, only to hurt them further by giving them medicine and playing with their lives. He confronted Reina, asking if it was her hobby to toy with people's fates. Reina quickly tried to deflect the conversation, insisting that the burning of the houses was a misunderstanding and that she had nothing to do with it. The Duke, however, remained firm. He told her that in any case, he could not ally with someone who used black magic to exterminate monsters. He reminded her that her magic was akin to that of the Demon King. Trusting her could lead to more danger than they were already facing. The scene shifted to a castle where two men were reporting to a priest. They informed him that the issue he had mentioned earlier had been handled, and the northern residents would now suspect the princess. The priest smiled, his expression one of satisfaction. He remarked that it felt like the gears of his plan were finally turning properly. His gaze landed on Rostin, and he pitied him, but he also emphasized that this was his mission. He pleaded with Rostin to become a beautiful sacrifice for the saint. Back with Reina, she was lost in thought, recalling what Rostin had said to her about how they didn't need her help. She felt a sense of urgency to offer her assistance again. Veronica in the room voiced her concern, expressing doubt about whether they should eat so well when the villagers were suffering. She had heard that the villagers were unable to sleep or eat properly due to their fear and distress. Just then, a man in the group interrupted, stating that the villagers' suffering was their own fault. He argued that they had refused the princess's offer, leading them to suspect her of being the village arsonist. He exclaimed that their doubts stemmed from a lack of understanding. He raised his voice, declaring that the princess's flames were pure and that Reina was entirely different from what they believed. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door, interrupting the tension in the room. Reina jumped to her feet, feeling a surge of instinct telling her that something was wrong. She approached the door cautiously, opening it to reveal Chase, visibly injured and breathing heavily. Panic flashed in his eyes as he pleaded with her to help them. He urgently called out for her to save their lord, desperation evident in his voice. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, and Reina's heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation unfolding before her. Chase was visibly scared as he sat on a bed, his face pale and his hands trembling. He exclaimed that when they first entered the labyrinth, it seemed easy because there were not many monsters. But as they ventured deeper, everything changed. They had discovered the labyrinth stone that the lady had mentioned earlier. Suddenly, they were attacked by countless monsters. Chase and a few other soldiers managed to escape, but the Duke, who had bravely tried to stop the monsters, was still trapped inside the labyrinth. The gravity of his words shocked everyone in the room, especially Reina. Chase suddenly dropped to his knees, begging Princess Reina for help. He told her that the whole north was in grave danger. His eyes were wide with desperation, and it was clear that time was running out. The scene shifted to the castle, where chaos reigned. A horde of monsters approached, and the soldiers were gripped by fear. Even the civilians were terrified. A mother clutched her children tightly, whispering that someone would come to help. Back with Reina, she felt frustrated as she approached the labyrinth, anger boiling inside her due to Rostin's earlier behavior. Why did she need to help him? She muttered to herself, feeling conflicted. As she entered the labyrinth, her mind raced with thoughts. She wondered why she had never heard of Duke Winterson before. It troubled her deeply. Reina recalled that if she were to play the game as a saintess, several characters worth targeting would appear. But Rostin was nowhere to be found. He was not listed as a strategic character. Even though Rostin was undeniably handsome, she found his personality and behavior off-putting. She hated people who were harsh and unkind. As she ventured deeper into the labyrinth, she entered a room, her heart pounding, convinced that the Duke would be there. She imagined the rewards he would offer her for saving him. The scene shifted back to the castle where the prince was searching for the priest. He called out, demanding the priest come out of hiding. To his surprise, the priest stepped forward, a calm smile on his face. The prince confronted him, questioning why the situation in the north was deteriorating and why he was not sending any support. He held the priest's face, demanding answers, mentioning that his prophecies had never been wrong. However, lately, he had lost some of his spiritual strength. The prince's frustration only deepened. The priest assured him not to worry, stating that he was just meeting the necessary conditions for something greater to unfold. Meanwhile, Reina entered a dimly lit room in the labyrinth. Her heart sank as she noticed a gruesome sight: a pile of dead bodies lay scattered around. She questioned herself, recalling that she had played this game many times before. But why couldn't she remember Rostin, the Duke of the North? Then it hit her like a wave. Each time she started a new playthrough, it had always been after Rostin had died. The scene shifted back to the prince and the priest. Just then, a man rushed in, urgently informing the priest that the altar was shining brightly. With the appearance of the devil, the crisis in the north, and Rostin's death, all the conditions had been met. The priest's smile widened as he narrated to himself that finally, a saintess would descend. A strange lady with flowing blonde hair materialized, and her presence filled the room with an eerie energy. The priest knew that he had successfully fulfilled his plans, and a sense of dark anticipation hung in the air, marking the beginning of something sinister. Reina stood frozen in shock as she noticed Rostin's body, encased in ice. The sight struck her deeply, and she began to narrate in her mind that beneath the labyrinth stone, a gruesome scene of slaughter had unfolded. She glanced around and caught sight of the corpse of a labyrinth boss, a reminder of the fierce battle that had taken place. It dawned on her that if the Duke had truly held on until the end to kill the labyrinth boss, he must have collapsed afterward. Yet something felt off. Only his body was frozen, and there were no monsters in the labyrinth that wielded ice magic. Determined to help, Reina knelt beside Rostin and gently placed her hand on his icy form. She whispered that she needed him in the north. The urgency in her voice filled the room, but the ice surrounding him remained impenetrable. The scene shifted to the saintess, who was just arrived in this world. She complained to the priest that he should have put some cushions under the altar because she had fallen very hard. The priest approached her with a welcoming demeanor, greeting her as a holy woman. Back in the labyrinth, Reina focused on her magic, trying to melt the ice that imprisoned Rostin. She understood that she had to be careful, melting it slowly to avoid harming his body. She pleaded with him to come back to life, pouring all her energy into the task. However, even as she managed to thaw the ice, his body remained still and unresponsive. Panic gripped her as she realized he hadn't opened his eyes. Reina thought about the law of this world, where the death of Rostin seemed predetermined. She questioned if it was possible to change the course of fate. A life spent waiting for the devil, fighting against monsters, only to freeze to death in a dark corner of the northern labyrinth. The idea weighed heavily on her mind, and she held his body tightly, demanding that he at least apologize for doubting her and for pushing her into a corner. She shouted for him to open his eyes. In a fit of desperation, she threw him onto the ground and sat on him, pleading for him to wake up. As she listened closely, she could hear the faint sound of his heartbeats, but they felt cold, distant. In that moment, memories of her previous life flooded her mind. She wondered if her parents had been happy when they learned of her death, how it must have been hard for them because of her existence. She thought about her hopes for this life, wishing that Rostin would not have any regrets. The northern region he had wanted to protect so dearly weighed heavily on her heart. She vowed that she would not allow his sacrifice to be in vain. She would protect the north with everything she had. She reassured him that it was her responsibility now. Suddenly, a voice shouted from behind her, breaking the tension. The scene shifted to the prince and the priest, where the prince confronted the priest. He demanded to know if this was part of his plan. The priest responded calmly, explaining that this was the flow that God had spoken of, where the saint would save the north and become a hero in the process. The prince, however, seemed concerned. He announced that there were rumors circulating about a devil appearing in the north. He warned that if he encountered the devil, he would be eaten right away, his tone laced with urgency and fear. The scene shifted back to the saintess, who now stood before Reina. She asked Reina if she was truly a human. Reina's shock was palpable, and she quickly realized that this woman was indeed a saint. The saintess held a staff in her hand, radiating an aura of power and mystery. Reina felt a mix of emotions: curiosity, fear, and a sense of purpose as she faced this unexpected figure. The weight of destiny pressed upon them both, and Reina wondered what would come next in this unfolding tale. Reina stood there, staring at the saintess with confusion. She questioned how a saint had arrived in the labyrinth, but soon realized that the specifics didn't really matter in this dire moment. If the saint appeared now, it meant that the situation was already critical, perhaps even over. The saint accused Reina of attacking an unconscious person. Anger flared within Reina as she exclaimed that it was a misunderstanding. She was frustrated at how quickly the saint jumped to conclusions. In her mind, Reina noted the stark difference between herself and the saint. Unlike her, the saint possessed healing and resurrection magic, abilities that could turn the tide of this tragedy. Suddenly, a chilling realization washed over her: the labyrinth was absorbing the corpses of the fallen soldiers. She turned to the saint with urgency, requesting that she use her resurrection powers to bring Rostin and the soldiers back to life. Reina insisted that as a saint, it was her responsibility to save them. Unfortunately, the saint informed her that she couldn't use her resurrection power yet. She was still too weak, having only reached level 1 because she hadn't faced any monsters on her way. Determined to help, Reina offered her assistance in killing monsters. Together, they scoured the labyrinth until they finally found one. The saint raised her staff, focusing her magic, and successfully defeated the creature. To Reina's relief, the saint's level increased to 30, and she unlocked a resurrection skill. Reina thought to herself that it had taken so much effort just to find that one monster among the vastness of the mountain. The saint exclaimed that she was now ready to resurrect the fallen. With determination, she lifted her staff and attempted to channel her magic. However, nothing happened. Reina frowned and asked why the resurrection magic wasn't working. A wave of dread washed over her as she narrated her thoughts, contemplating the possibility that it might truly be impossible to revive Rostin. Suddenly, one of the monsters that they had just defeated began to stir and attempted to attack them. The saint's eyes widened in realization she had made a mistake and accidentally healed the monster instead of dealing with it. In a flash of instinct, Reina took action. With a single strike, she dispatched the boss monster, leaving no room for doubt about her own strength. The saint looked at her in awe and offered her compliments, praising her skill. Reina, feeling a mix of anger and urgency, ordered the saint to quickly resurrect Rostin. The saint, now understanding the gravity of the situation, nodded and agreed to comply. The scene shifted and Rostin slowly began to awaken. The saint gently asked him if he was awake, her voice filled with concern. Rostin groaned and sat up, looking around in confusion. He quickly focused on Reina and expressed his gratitude for her help. Their eyes met, a moment of unspoken understanding passing between them. The scene transitioned to the village, where joy erupted among the villagers. They celebrated because they were safe now, having heard the news that Rostin had conquered the northern labyrinth. The villagers showered blessings upon him, expressing their hopes for his upcoming journey. The air was filled with laughter and relief, the weight of fear finally lifting. Reina made her way home, feeling a sense of peace settling around her. She thought that things should be more peaceful now, after all the chaos they had faced together. Suddenly, she noticed a figure approaching on horseback. It was Rostin. He reined in his horse beside her and informed her that he had come to give her ownership of the mansion. Reina looked at Rostin with a mix of skepticism and delight. She asked him if he was really giving her this permit so easily, but deep down, she felt a surge of happiness. It felt like hitting the jackpot, a chance to claim something precious and meaningful. Rostin then exclaimed that in the north, the Mansion of the Abyss was a place nobody wanted to buy, even if it was given away for free. He explained that it was dangerous and uninhabitable, a place shunned by all. Suddenly, he continued by mentioning a young lady who had made a foolish choice to live there. Reina felt a spark of irritation and asked if he was trying to pick a fight with her. Rostin, however, pressed on, explaining that there was hardly any food in the north. This scarcity led to widespread poverty, and no noble would dare venture there because there was nothing to gain. It was clear that living there was not a wise decision. Yet here was this young lady who chose to stay and ended up saving him and many others. He announced that the fact the princess stayed there might have been a last mercy bestowed upon him by the gods. He shared that the residents had seen black flames burning from the edge of the fortress. Reina felt a warmth spread through her as she realized he was referring to the flames she had surrounded the fortress with before heading into the labyrinth to save him. Those very flames had provided the warmth and protection the residents needed to survive. Rostin continued, saying that it was those flames that allowed the residents to endure, and he spoke of how the lady was able to share warmth even with Luca. His tone shifted as he confessed that the reason he had kept doubting and cornering her was out of jealousy for the power she possessed. Kneeling before her, he pleaded for her forgiveness for his foolish actions. He then asked if the pledge she made to protect the North was still valid. If so, he wanted to publicly praise her in front of everyone. This request brought back a memory for Reina. She recalled telling him that she would protect the North, and she asked if he had heard everything she had said back then. In a bold move, he reached out his hand toward her, and she instinctively took it. Their hands clasped together, and in that moment, he leaned in and kissed her. The surrounding crowd watched, their expressions filled with joy for the princess. The scene shifted to the village as Rostin and Reina entered through the gates of the fortress on their horses. Reina noticed that the villagers were praising her, exclaiming that the black flames hadn't hurt them at all. Instead, they had saved them, and they called her the young lady who had saved them all. She realized that those who once feared her magic were now smiling and cheering for her. Yet, amid the celebration, she was reminded of her old life. In her past life, she had felt like a burden to her parents. The contrast between their joy and her own sadness weighed heavily on her heart. As the villagers shouted her name, the happiness around her felt bittersweet. Rostin quickly noticed her change in expression and asked her why she seemed sad. Reina replied that she was lost in thoughts about her family, memories washing over her like waves. Suddenly, Rostin remembered something her father had once told him, that Reina was merely a passageway to evil and nothing more. This recollection stirred something within him, and he turned to her with a serious expression. If she permitted it, he expressed a desire to become her family. This unexpected proposal left her feeling confused. She began to wonder if he was truly proposing to her in this moment. Reina stood in front of a tall mirror, her reflection gazing back at her with an undeniable allure. She had to admit to herself that she was very beautiful. Even the Duke could not resist her charm. Just as she admired her own image, the scene shifted to Rostin, who was speaking with warmth and sincerity. He told her that not just he, but everyone in the North considered her family. His words felt comforting, and he expressed his gratitude for the great favor she had done for him. As Reina processed his words, a thought struck her. Perhaps he hadn't meant it as a proposal after all. Frustration bubbled within her because at first she had felt a spark of hope. Yet, she reminded herself that she was still happy in a way. After all, it was not as if they would simply freeload without contributing. They were family now, and family helped each other. The scene transitioned to the gathering of villagers where the saintess stood, addressing everyone with a commanding presence. She called upon them to hail the saintess, declaring that her god's protection would be eternal. Reina watched this with a mix of emotions. She began to narrate her thoughts, recalling that in the main storyline of the game, the saintess had conquered the northern labyrinth all by herself. That achievement was never meant for her, and a wave of jealousy washed over Reina. She pondered how the story would unfold now that the game had deviated from its original path. She quickly reassured herself that it wouldn't be a big problem and everything would be fine. The scene shifted again, this time to the northern labyrinth. A strange kid emerged, a manifestation of black magic taking the form of a monstrous creature. Reina's mind raced as she thought about the lingering danger. The scene then changed back to her narration, reflecting on the fact that while the monsters may have disappeared, the people continued to suffer from hunger and the biting cold. As their protector and now family member, she felt a strong responsibility to do something to help them. Using her black magic, Reina reached out to aid everyone around her. A young girl nearby exclaimed that she no longer felt cold. Her family looked at her in awe, wondering how this was even possible. They soon realized it was the magic of the saintess that had helped. Meanwhile, Reina contemplated the enormity of what she was doing. It took a significant amount of power to warm all the houses, but she felt confident. Thanks to the experience she had gained from breaking the northern labyrinth, she had reached level 1000, granting her immense power. She exclaimed to herself that she could handle such a vast amount of energy now. In fact, There was a chance she could manage even more because her power had reached level 999. A sense of joy and excitement filled her as she reveled in her newfound abilities. The scene shifted again to the priest, who was speaking with the saintess. He asked her if her level was still at 30, to which she nodded. However, he was quick to point out that Reina had already cleared the northern labyrinth by the time she arrived. The priest's expression changed as he realized that something was off. He thought about how strange it was that she had not reached her level after conquering the labyrinth. Since it was already taken care of, he decided it would be beneficial to assign her a training instructor for special training. The saintess looked puzzled, unsure of what the priest meant. The scene then shifted to a buggy where two men were deep in conversation. They discussed the presence of the Demon King, while a figure named Kaelin lay nearby, listening intently. One man announced that he had heard the Demon King was quietly hiding at the northern tip of the land. Upon hearing this, Kaelin's interest was piqued. He quickly stood up and shouted that if the Demon King was in the north, then the champion of justice, Kaelin, could not just sit by and watch. His resolve strengthened and determination filled his heart as he prepared to act against this new threat. Rostin felt an immense wave of gratitude towards Reina for all her help and support. Thanks to her, stability had returned to the village, and even Luco was doing much better than before. The entire community was thriving again, bustling with life and energy. Rostin took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. He realized that he now had a debt to repay, one that he felt obligated to honor. With a determined look on his face, he turned to his men and inquired about the client responsible for the assassination attempt on him. His voice held an edge of urgency as he asked if they had managed to track down that person yet. One of his men stepped forward, indicating that they had narrowed down the list of suspects somewhat, but there was a complication that needed addressing. Rostin pressed for details, eager to resolve the situation as swiftly as possible, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Reina and her colleagues, who were dedicating their time to donating food to the local children. Amidst the laughter and joy of the gathering, a strange little boy suddenly grabbed her clothes. This child seemed to have emerged from the dark magic associated with the labyrinth, his presence unsettling yet intriguing. Confused, Reina asked who he was, as she had never seen him before. She decided to take him to the care center nearby, where a kind lady greeted them. The woman informed her that they had recently started looking after this child. She explained that the guards on patrol had found him wandering down the mountain barefoot and alone. They had brought him to the center, but the little boy hadn't spoken a single word since his arrival. The staff was still trying to figure out his name and gather any information about his past. Reina expressed disbelief that this strange child seemed so intent on following her. She knelt down, taking the boy to the side, and reassured him that she would come back again soon. Until then, she encouraged him to take care of himself and stay safe. As she mounted her horse to leave, she turned back and noticed that the child was still watching her with wide, innocent eyes, unable to break away from her presence. A twinge of guilt washed over Reina for leaving him there alone. She wasn't confident in her ability to raise someone, but the thought of abandoning him tugged at her heart, leaving her feeling conflicted. The scene shifted again, showing Kaelin trudging through the snow with unwavering determination. The biting cold felt as if it were tearing his flesh apart, a harsh reminder of the North's merciless nature. He cursed the relentless chill that gnawed at his spirit. He thought about how both hunger and cold were pushing him to his limits, but fueled by sheer willpower, he shouted out that he would overcome this adversity. Suddenly, without warning, his strength gave out, and he collapsed into the snow. A nearby lady noticed him lying there, barely conscious, and quickly alerted others to his presence. They rushed to help, taking Kaelin into their warm home and providing him with steaming hot food. They apologized for the limited portions, explaining that they were also struggling and didn't have enough to feed themselves, but Kaelin gratefully accepted the meal, exclaiming that it was more than enough for him. A woman warned him gently that he should consider returning to the south because the north was cursed by the Demon King. Kaelin couldn't help but narrate in his mind how the Demon King had been tormenting the northern residents for far too long. He vowed to himself that no matter where the little demon might hide, the warrior of justice would find him. He would make the Demon King pay for all his sins and restore peace to the north. The scene shifted back to Reina, who had brought the strange child to her home. Her friends were taken aback when they saw him, their expressions a mixture of surprise and curiosity. They tried to engage him, calling him cute, but quickly noticed that the child seemed fixated on Reina, following her every move with wide, trusting eyes. Reina couldn't help but laugh at the situation, finding it endearing yet puzzling. As night fell, Reina prepared for bed, a sense of warmth surrounding her in her cozy room. She brought the child with her, assuring him that since he seemed anxious, she would sleep with him just for that night. However, she added with a gentle smile that starting the next day, he would need to sleep alone. He had to be brave, she told him. As she lay there, her thoughts drifted to the child's past. She imagined that being born weak might have led to him being abandoned by his parents. It broke her heart to think of him left barefoot and alone, wandering in the cold. With resolve, she decided to give him a name, Trevor. She whispered to him softly, expressing her hope that he would grow strong enough that one day his parents would regret abandoning him. The next morning, Reina woke up feeling refreshed and turned to check on Trevor. She called out to him, asking if he had slept well. To her utter shock, she found that Trevor had transformed into an adult overnight. His features were striking, and his posture exuded confidence. Reina's heart raced as she processed the startling change. Shocked, she screamed in disbelief, demanding to know who he was. The reality of the situation left her in a whirlwind of confusion and astonishment. How could this transformation have happened? The saintess felt an overwhelming sense of joy as she anticipated the special training day ahead. She recalled the priest's words about the paladin Aiden, who would be her trainer. Excitement bubbled within her at the thought of meeting someone who might be even more handsome than the priest. She found herself wondering what kind of person Aiden really was and how he would conduct the training. The scene shifted to her sitting at a large table, ready to enjoy her meal. She looked at the butler and asked about the food that had been laid out before her. The butler informed her that this meal plan had been specifically prepared by Aiden for her training. However, she felt a bit confused by the selection of food. It wasn't what she expected, but she decided to eat anyway, knowing she needed the energy for the day ahead. After finishing her meal, she headed straight to her training. As she approached the training grounds, a stern man informed her that she was 5 minutes late. He pointed out that Lord Aiden did not forgive tardiness and had ordered her to run 5 laps around the playground as punishment. Anger bubbled inside her. She felt that he was being overly strict. Above her, Lord Aiden observed the scene, exclaiming that he had been entrusted with an important task. It was his duty to train her and ensure that the saintess could protect the world. He declared with determination that he would do his utmost to guide her through her training. The scene shifted again to Rostin, who was engaged in a serious discussion with Reina's father. Rostin firmly stated that he could not arrest the Duke. He argued that it would be far better to apologize directly to Reina. He pointed out the absurdity of having set an assassination team after an innocent person like her. His voice rose in anger as he proclaimed that Reina did not feel guilty about her powers. He added that black magic itself was considered a sin, and he could not stand by while Reina was vilified for something she had used to save the North. Drawing his sword, he emphasized that, as the Duke had said, power was not inherently righteous, it all depended on how one chose to wield it. With a swift swing, he cut a statue in half, illustrating his point. He narrated in his mind that power could be used for either good or evil. He made it clear that Reina, who used black magic to save their home, deserved respect, not scorn. He threatened Reina's father, warning that if he attempted to harm her again simply for her use of black magic, he would face dire consequences. As he left the room, Reina's father was left trembling, filled with fear. The scene then shifted to Trevor, who was now the center of attention. Everyone marveled at how he had grown overnight. Reina found herself tying up his hair while pondering why he chose to follow her. She remembered that Trevor was a child born from a monster's lineage, and she felt a mix of compassion and concern. In an effort to help him control his powers, she gave him a necklace designed to manage his black magic. She explained that even though he was a child of a monster, with the right upbringing, he could learn to control his abilities. She hugged him tightly, assuring him that they could get along well together. Trevor blushed, feeling warmth from her embrace and grateful for her kindness. The scene shifted again to the village, where a soldier announced that food had finally arrived from the east. He instructed everyone to form a line so they could distribute the food fairly. Anticipation filled the air as the villagers lined up, eager to receive the provisions. However, when the bags were opened, shock rippled through the crowd. Instead of food, the bags were filled with stones. Rostin stood in the center of the jail. He recalled the recent events. The number of thefts had risen alarmingly. Each day brought more hungry individuals resorting to stealing food. It was a grim reality that he could not ignore. He looked around at the few remaining items and realized that this food would not last long. It was a race against time. As he pondered possible solutions, a flicker of determination ignited within him. He decided to seek out the owner of the care center. Maybe she would have some insights into the situation. When he arrived at the center, he was greeted by the owner, a woman whose warmth contrasted with the chilly atmosphere outside. She listened as Rostin shared his concerns about the escalating food crisis. To his surprise, she revealed that they were not struggling at all. Lady Reina had provided them with a steady supply of food from her greenhouse. Rostin's mind raced at this revelation. He had heard whispers of Reina's greenhouse, but had never seen it himself. As he left the care center, his curiosity deepened. The scene shifted to Reina's greenhouse, where she tended to her vibrant plants. The tomatoes glistened under the sunlight, their red hue a stark contrast to the frost outside. She enthusiastically extolled the virtues of fresh produce, claiming that tomatoes and cherries were not only delicious, but also good for the body. Just then, her friend interrupted her with news that Rostin had come to see her. Rostin entered the greenhouse, his presence commanding, yet a hint of vulnerability lingered in his demeanor. He recounted the recent confrontation with the Duke. The fallout had been severe. Their food supply had been cut off, and now Rostin was faced with the grim task of trying to feed the people of his village. He explained that the North held greater importance for him than mere pride. Reina listened carefully, her expression shifting from concern to frustration. She advised him to apologize to the Duke to mend their fractured relationship. But Rostin shook his head, firmly refusing to compromise his honor. His belief in standing tall against injustice was unyielding even in the face of hardship. Reina's anger flared as she crossed her arms and challenged his cocky attitude. She could not understand why he would allow pride to overshadow the pressing needs of his people. Rostin took a deep breath, attempting to temper the rising tension. Then he shifted the conversation to her greenhouse. The villagers needed food desperately, and if Reina had the means to help, perhaps they could devise a plan together. He proposed that they could cultivate a larger area of land. He took her outside to the vast stretch of land he had in mind. It was promising but daunting. As they stood together gazing at the barren field, Reina frowned. The size of the land was overwhelming, and she explained that her powers would not be able to cover such a large area effectively. Even if they managed to cultivate the land, the absence of water would pose a serious problem. The river that usually flowed nearby had become a frozen solid mass, making irrigation impossible. Frustration began to boil within Rostin. They had to find a way to overcome these obstacles. Suddenly, he remembered tales he had heard about ancient methods of water collection. Perhaps they could gather melted snow or harness rainwater when the season allowed. But he needed more than just hope. They would need a concrete plan and resources to make it happen. The scene shifted to a small town where an urgent meeting was taking place. A man had brought a craftswoman named Eileen to meet the chief. She had a reputation for her skill and expertise in creating durable safes. The chief sat at his desk, listening intently as the man explained the importance of securing the golden bat. This artifact was the town's pride, and its safety was paramount. Eileen stood with confidence, her hands clasped in front of her. The chief expressed his trust in her abilities. She listened carefully to the details of the task and began to formulate ideas on how to construct a safe that would be both effective and secure. Her mind raced with possibilities as she thought about the materials available in the town. Meanwhile, Kalen had finally reached the mansion where he hoped to find refuge. His heart raced as he cast a hiding spell to conceal himself. He had learned the art of stealth through countless encounters. But despite his preparations, he was not completely invisible. Trevor happened to glance out the window, and his keen eyes spotted the faintest flicker of movement. Trevor's instincts kicked in, and he stepped closer to the window, narrowing his gaze. He could sense that something was amiss. The mansion was supposed to be secure, yet here he was sensing an intruder lurking nearby. Kalen was keeping a watchful eye on Trevor, convinced that he must be the Demon King due to his unusual appearance. He squinted suspiciously at the young boy, exclaiming that Trevor was most definitely the Demon King. Anyone could tell that he looked the part, with his striking features and an aura that seemed out of place in the northern region. Kalen's mind raced with questions, and he couldn't help but wonder what kind of nefarious plan Trevor was concocting in this isolated corner of the world. Meanwhile, Trevor was blissfully unaware of Kalen's suspicions, munching on food and dozing off in the middle of nowhere. Even a nearby maid urged him to leave, finding his presence annoying. Kalen's gaze sharpened as he noticed Trevor approaching Luca. He narrated in his mind that if the Demon King had forgotten his dream of world domination, it was a strange sight indeed. Trevor seemed to be acting completely innocent, laughing and playing, which only added to Kalen's frustration. How could someone who looked so much like a Demon King be so carefree? The scene shifted to Rostin, who was bustling around as he brought a craftswoman that Reina had requested. Her name was Eileen, and as she introduced herself, she claimed to be the master of various machines and tools. Reina, watching the interaction, found herself lost in thought. She wondered how much easier her life would be if she had been a craftswoman. The idea intrigued her. In her past life, her father had worked with all kinds of machinery, and his hands had never known a moment free from grease or oil. Something about Eileen made Reina feel suspicious, and she knew she had to test her skills before fully trusting her. Reina approached Eileen with a task. Before she entrusted her with any major projects, she would like her to take care of the mansion's facilities first. Reina specified that she wanted Eileen to install a heating and water system in the Abyssal Mansion. She mentioned that Eileen could use her magic as the energy source for the installation. Eileen, with a confident smile, announced that for a mansion of this size, it would indeed cost a considerable amount of money. Reina quickly reassured her, saying that she need not worry about finances because she had plenty of treasure stored away. The scene shifted to the Saintess, who was breathing heavily as she narrated that it had already been a week since she began training under Holy Knight Aiden. Unfortunately, the only training she had done so far consisted of running around the training grounds, striking with a sword, and jumping rope. It felt monotonous, and she was starting to feel the weight of her situation. All she could think about was how desperately she needed to level up. The Saintess wished that she could experience the same kind of power leveling that Reina seemed to effortlessly achieve. Determined to improve, she began another round of running, pushing herself harder. Fast forward 1 month later, and Eileen was bustling around the mansion, announcing that she had successfully installed all the pipes in the floor. She proudly explained that she had also set up water pipes to draw up the groundwater, making the whole system efficient and easy to use. One of Reina's friends, beaming with excitement, exclaimed that now they wouldn't have to fetch water manually anymore. This revelation brought a wave of relief to everyone. Reina, observing the installations, thought about how the heating pipes in the floor efficiently distributed warmth throughout the mansion, reducing magic usage by an impressive 80%. She had never anticipated that Eileen would set up the facility so perfectly. Reflecting on her earlier doubts about Eileen's skills, Reina felt embarrassed for having been skeptical. As Reina watched Eileen work, her thoughts wandered to the potential transformations the mansion could undergo. With Eileen's impressive mechanical skills, she could even transform the granary area into something much more efficient and productive. Eileen's work was proving to be invaluable, and Reina felt a renewed sense of optimism about the future. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a small town in the west, where two men were huddled together, trying to open a vault that seemed to hold great significance. One man cautioned the other not to open it, fearing the repercussions. The other man, however, was insistent, suggesting that if they got caught, they could easily blame the craftswoman for opening the vault. With a nod of agreement, they managed to pry it open, their hearts racing with anticipation. But when they peered inside, their excitement quickly turned to despair. The golden bat that they had hoped to find was already gone, leaving them in shock. They exchanged bewildered glances, realizing that their plans had been foiled and that they would have to come up with a new scheme. Reina approached her friends with curiosity, asking what they were talking about. They looked a bit anxious as they informed her about the strange occurrences in the mansion. They explained that in a small room, the blanket had been messed up and all the food they had prepared seemed to have disappeared all at once. The unsettling situation was clearly bothering them. Reina frowned, pondering the strange events. She voiced her concerns, suggesting that perhaps there could be a demon hiding in their mansion. The idea sent a shiver down her spine, but she tried to shake it off. The scene shifted to Reina telling Trevor that she was going out for a while. She instructed him to take care of the house until she returned. Meanwhile, Kalen, who had been hiding in the corner, listened intently to their conversation. His heart raced as he realized that he had been spying on the supposed Demon King for a whole month. Now, he finally understood why the Demon King was living so comfortably in this mansion.